So trying to restart. I understand there's a lot of live Facebook that's happening around the world these days, which I kind of love. So it may stop every once in a while when I see that it's rebooting. I'll try to just stop in the story so that I don't lose you along the way. Hope everybody's had a good week. I've been hearing from a lot of people that they're experiencing the veil thinning and that they're having dreams about loved ones who've passed and feeling things close. And I think that's happening. I think when we slow down and quiet ourselves, that we become aware of the things that are around us. Or things are happening and things are actually moving in because we've provided space for them to move in, right? We're not all hustling and bustling everywhere, and so there's space, there's openness. Anyway, tonight I'm going to talk to you about a place. It's the State Hospital in Traverse City, Michigan. It is, right now, I believe it's called Traverse City Commons, and it's been developed, and there's some beautiful, amazing development there. There's really cool, trendy restaurants and bakeries and breweries and senior care centers and housing and apartments and condos, and it's a really lovely place and a wonderful development in Traverse City. But my first encounter there was before there was any development at all. This was a long time ago. When I was pregnant with Ezra, I was going to see my midwife up in Traverse City, and I would come in up, not Garfield, I'd come in the other end, 31, and there was all kinds of traffic. I don't know if there was an accident or something going on, and so I slipped off of the main drag and turned into the State Hospital. This was when it was still all completely abandoned, before any development at all had even been considered. This is, like 30 some years ago. And I was driving through there so I wouldn't be late for my appointment. And the ISD had buildings in there, and there was some buildings that were open. But the first building that I encountered was this huge building, multiple floors, just a big brick. Everything is brick, and it's this beautiful yellow brick. When it was built, it was designed to be very aesthetic and to create a pastoral cure for people, a cure of tranquility and light and beauty. But as I drove up on this enormous building that had, I think, 3 stories with a porch on the side that I drove on, the porches had chain link fence chaining in the porches. And as I drove in, I was in a hurry, as I said, but I got this feeling that somebody was looking at me, and I looked, and it appeared in a split second. You see things out of the corner of your eye, and then when you look full on, they're gone. So out of the corner of my eye, I just saw all these hands of men, just with their fingers in the chain link fence, just holding onto the chain link fence and just going, oh, and sort of like just yelling for me that they were there. And I saw them there, and I was like, whoa. And then when I looked full on, it was an abandoned building, and I thought, holy moly, there's a lot of energy in that place. So then you turn the corner and drive down the road, and I'm heading back behind Munson Hospital. But before I got there was another building, and it was quite smaller. It was just past the great big building, and it had a gated courtyard that was all overgrown. And as I pulled up to there, I could hear like children's voices that were calling out, and it was not like a playground sound. It was a very upset, anguished kind of sound, like calling for your mother or calling for somebody and nobody's coming kind of thing. It was just like this loud plea coming out of that place. And I was like, oh man, I got to get off this property pretty soon. And I drove past that, And then there was a street where I could turn back out onto the main dragon. And I did that, and that was my first experience with the state hospital. It was many, many years later, when my children were teenagers, that it became a fun place to go ghosting. And a lot of people would go in. Now, this place has multiple buildings. It was a farm. So there were farm buildings up in one section. There were the dormitories or housing buildings in the other section. There was housing for staff, for the doctors and other staff members that were really, beautiful Victorian kind of homes. And it had multiple buildings. And then there were other buildings that appeared to have been built later that were more like housing buildings, hospital-like housing buildings. But the main ones in the main place were all this beautiful architecture, big windows and yellow brick and lots of high, steeply kind of things. But joining all of these buildings were tunnels that went between the different buildings. And this was to bring supplies in the winter, and to just an easier way to transport things from one building to another, from the kitchen areas to where the people were living, and to get people from one building to another for treatment or whatever. But all these tunnels underneath, this whole network of tunnels beneath the buildings, and not like crawl through tunnels, but like big walk through tunnels. And before anything was developed, before anybody had bought it for development, it was just completely abandoned. My children, as teenagers, and their friends would go up there and try to go looking for scary things, get their adrenaline rushes on. And I believe one time there was a door that opened into one of the tunnels, and they went down in, and the most dangerous thing there was probably asbestos and toxins and everything in those tunnels, but they had themselves spooked quite a bit in there. At one point, they went into a building that was one of the houses that was not a place for patients, but it was a place for a caretaker or a doctor or somebody like that. And Aaron Ezra was along. Now, Ezra is my youngest, and all of my children have been cursed with the same gift that I have. Some acknowledge it more than others. Some are like, no, not having of it. But of all of them, Ezra is probably the most naturally tuned in. When he was born at home, and he was born in the caul. What that means is that before he was born, his amniotic sac was born first, and then he just slipped in it. So there was no crowning, there was no water breaking until after he was born. So his whole little body slipped into that water balloon, and then it broke. Then the water broke, and there he was. And in many cultures, especially Hoodoo cultures, and in my family traditions, someone who is born in the caul is said to have great seeing power, because before you're born, you're in this world, so it keeps you a connection between the different worlds. And although Ezra, as a little boy, never really, didn't have a lot of things like that happen, as he's grown, it's been more and more and more. And he's he's one of those people who are like a turned on flashlight in a dark room when it comes to spirits and ghosts. And so he was up there. I know I'm touching my face, but I have an itch, and I'm home alone, and I washed my hands, so there you go. He was a young, older teenager. And he and some friends, including his sister, went up and when it got into this building, and were exploring around this abandoned building. And when he came home, he was freaking out. Something really scared him, but he had something that came home with him. And he had not learned how to not let things come home with you, you know. And so he came back, and he was very anxious, and he was scared by it. And he said, "I don't think it's gone. I think there's something still here." And after he went to bed, he woke up and he's like, "There is something still here. I beg you guys," and the whole thing. So I ended up sitting him down, and we did an exorcism spell. Just smoked things away, and I told him, "Stay away from that place. You know, don't go there if things are coming home with you." But that didn't work for everybody, and not him either. I think that adrenaline and going looking for spooks in a place like that is just way more interesting than not. They went back. I'm going to tell you probably the most significant story towards the end, because I'll tell you a time when, after it was starting to be developed, we went up in the fall, and we were just walking around, and it was several of my kids, and I think maybe Bunce was there too, maybe not. But we were just walking the roads around, and there were buildings that were being worked on to get developed, and some had already been. There were some restaurants and things. But we walked towards the back of the property where there were still many empty dormitory style or hospital type buildings. And as we were walking along, just looking in the buildings, in the windows, you could see, like, you could make out shadows, but not just shadows, but like illuminated shadows were light figures in the windows. We could see figures in the windows. I believe that my kids got some photographs of figures in the windows. There was one of, looked like a doctor with a white coat in a window, and they'll hopefully, if they have those photographs, they'll post them here, some of those, or their friends. So we're walking past this building, and it's dark, and we're just, it's like Halloween almost time, and there were other people out walking around. It was a really warm night, and but there was nobody right near us. And in one of these buildings, there was like a side door, like a back door, side door. The front door had a big porch with, it was clear it was a front door, but around the side, there was like a back door. And as we came around, excuse me, the corner, there was a man standing by that back door smoking a cigarette. And you could see, he put it up to his mouth, and you could see the glow enhance as he inhaled. And he's just standing there kind of leaning on a post by the back door, smoking the cigarette. And he had on his belt loop, he had some keys. And he's smoking the cigarette, and he's kind of fingering the keys, and you could hear the keys jingling. And I wasn't sure if it was it was a solid person, and I thought maybe it was a real person, and it was somebody that was going to tell us we weren't supposed to be there. We weren't in any buildings, we were just walking on the roads. But so as we came closer, I noticed that I couldn't smell the smoke. Now, I have very sensitive sense of smell for cigarette smoke. If I'm driving in my car with my windows closed, and the car next to me has their windows closed, and somebody is smoking, I could smell it. So we were close enough that I should have been able to smell the smoke. And when I didn't smell the smoke, I said to the others, "Do you see that guy there?" And the only one who said, "Yeah, I see him," was Ezra. And I said, "Okay, is he really there?" And then we all looked at each other, and the others started to see him, and then he just kind of backed up and disappeared into the building. And as we came around the corner, up in like the top floor, way farther away than if it was a real person, could have gotten to. We see the shadow moving by the windows and hear the jingling of the keys, those same keys. And I'm like, oh, that must be his place to guard. He must be like the caretaker of that building. But that was definitely a spirit. But he looked absolutely real. He looked like a real person, not a shadow, not transparent. Excuse me, I gotta wet my whistle here. Cheers. Are we all having a cocktail tonight? I am. Anyway, so as I say, I'm going to save one of the stories with the kids. So I'm going out of chronology here. So then time goes by, and it's been developed, and there's this great restaurant in the bottom of that building where I saw the men with their hands on the chain link fence on the porches, and it's this really cool building, but part of it is part of the tunnels. And then under this building, it's called Building 50, and under it, there's all kinds of shops now in these tunnels. And I remember the first time I went there for dinner. Great place, great food. It's called Tetria Stella, and you should go there if you're in or around Traverse City once we all get to go to restaurants again, because wonderful people own it. They would have music from time to time, and it was just a very cool place. But we went there, and you have to step down these steps to get to it, and as we stepped down, I just felt this total rush, like toe up through my neck and over my face, just this, this oppressive rush. It was like, okay, here we go. And we went in, and it's light, it's beautiful, it's not creepy in any way, but they have little tables in these little alcoves down in the tunnel areas. The restaurant's built in like the tunnel areas. And we were sitting in one of these little alcoves, and so there could be nobody behind me because there was like this little wall there, and the service would come by here, and as I was sitting there, I kept feeling this, on the inside side, just this, like touching my neck, like, like something just lightly touching my neck. Is it almost like a butterfly, if there was a butterfly there, just reaching, and I just kept, doing this and trying to carry on the conversation with Bunce across the table and order food, and when I turned to the server, it would do that again. It would be like, just right here, just this spot. This was the only spot I was being touched. And it tickled, but it was cold, and it shivered. It just gave me shivers the whole time, because I knew there was somebody there trying to get my attention, and I wasn't paying attention, and I wasn't going to pay attention, because I was not going to turn this dinner into a conversation with a ghost. So I just keep, doing this to try to keep it from leaning and putting my own hand there, and then getting it in my hair, and finally, just across the table, I just said, "Stop it. Just stop it." And Bones just looks at me and says, "What?" I said, "Nothing. This just has to stop." And he says, "Okay, all right." And he thought at first I was telling him to stop it, because, he'll go. Bunce goes, I love going and sitting with him, just him, and he'll just go on and tell these amazing stories. I know it looks like I tell stories, but Bunce will yammer on, and not yammer mindlessly. I mean, he talks about this interesting stuff, so when I'm like, "Stop it," he's like, "Wait, what did I do?" And then it was it. And then it stopped, and we were able to have the meal, but it stopped touching me, but it could still, if you close your eyes and somebody puts their hand right up against your face like this without touching it, you could probably do it with yourself right now. You can feel your hand well before it touches you. So the entire time, whoever was there was just like this close, just right there. And I could, like, out of the corner of my eye, if you put your hand, try it, just put your hand right here and close your eyes for a second, you'll feel it there. And then when you open your eye, you could just see it, and then it's not there. That's what the whole experience was like in there. So it was like, yeah, well, this place is pretty seriously haunted. And then my friend Mary Sue, who, I don't know if you're watching tonight, Mary Sue, but she might be watching later. My friend Mary Sue, after almost 30 years of marriage, her marriage dissolved. Her husband decided that he didn't want to be married to her anymore, and had found somebody else that he decided he liked better after a lifetime. And you can imagine how devastating that was for her. And she had to move out of the home that they built together with their own hands. And it was, as you can imagine, devastating. But she wanted to move up to Traverse City. And she was looking for a place. And she found this beautiful little apartment in Building 50, the place where the restaurant is and where the men were hanging off the porches. It had been renovated. The chain link fence was all gone. And on the upper floors, they had made these beautiful apartments. Some were loft-like apartments, big, spacious things. Some were studio apartments, and some were like one-bedrooms. And the one that came up that was available was, you'd go up, I believe it was like the second, I think it was the third floor because it was the top. And as you drive in, there's this window in a like a little window dormer kind of thing, and it was that apartment. So it had this beautiful light, this window, and it was remodeled so nice. It was a really nice apartment, and it was a place she could afford, a place she could go, and it's in this funky area. You know, she'd been living in the woods, and now she could live there. She could walk to work. She worked 10 minutes from there with the job she had. And there were restaurants she could go to, friends there. There was things she could do, so she thought this will be great. It's to go from country living and to this great city living in this cool place. And so she asked me to come. She rented it, and she asked me to come and check it out after she had moved in. And like a lot of my friends asked me to come check things out. And so I went there with a couple other people. And first of all, you have to walk back down into the basement to get to the elevator, and then you put in a code to use the elevator to get to the residences. And riding up that elevator once again was that pressure around, only this time it was like around my entire body. Just, it was like 100 hands just inches from my skin around my entire body. And I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. And got off the elevator, and she was all the way at the end of the hall. And there were other apartments and things around some. And I got to the end of the hall and knocked at the door and opened up the door, and it was the last at the end of the open space up there. And she had a red couch. I believe it was a red couch or chair, like a love seat, right under that window. And this beautiful light was coming in the morning. It would just fill with light. It was very pleasantly colored. And she says, so, what do you think? I mean, the first thing when I sit down. And I sat down and just kind of and tried to feel the place. And she knew that there would be ghosts there. You know, everybody knows there's ghosts there. But what she was asking was this going to be a place where she could be, or was this going to be a place with some malevolence, some things that could harm her? And as I sat in the chair where I was, I looked over at like a little bookshelf, and I saw two pictures, and one was her mother, and another was a picture of one of her very dear friends who had fairly recently passed away. And as soon as I glanced at those pictures, I could see from out behind her that they were there. and they were with her. And they were there with her, not to protect her from the ghosts of the place, but they were there to be with her as she went through this terrible time in her life. And so I told her, I said, well, there's a lot of energy here. Yes, there are a lot of ghosts here. I don't see anything here. I don't feel anything here that with ill intention or that would want to harm you. And your mother and your friend are right here. And they're with you here. So you've got that energy to protect you here. And so if you're comfortable living in a house with spirits, I think you'll be safe here. I don't think there's anything that will harm you here. And she said, okay, all right. Yeah, she said, I knew there were ghosts here, but I think I'll be okay, I'll be fine. And as long as my mom and Sharon, my friend, are here, that I'll be okay. And I said, okay, you'll be okay. Call me if you need anything, anytime, day or night, you can call me. Well, she lived there for months and months. And as she stayed there, she said that some nights she would wake up, she would talk to me, and said some nights she would wake up and there'd be all these white, wispy figures just overhead when she was laying on the bed. And she kept her mother's jewelry right by her, and she would just reach over and grab that, and they dissipate. But the other thing that was happening there, of course, she'd been like just discarded by her life partner. And so depression is something that you would expect in that situation. But she told me finally that she had been spending hours and hours in that red love seat underneath the windows in the light and feeling more and more and more depressed. And I said, have you talked to your doctor, And of course she does, that all that stuff. But that night I had a dream. And in the dream I saw her sitting in the light, in the sunlight, not in the red love seat, but in that hallway, in a rocking chair. And there were other women sitting alongside of her in rocking chairs, and just sitting and rocking, doing nothing else. And it alarmed me. When that place was built in the late 1800s, it was built as a place for people who were suffering from mental illness, from depression, from various other things. And it was a place to go. The doctors who designed these places thought that if you could get people out of the cities, out of their own environment, and give them the rest cure, is what it was called, with sunlight, healthy food grown right on the property, walks in the fresh air, and just time without anything to stress you out. So no reading books, no hearing news, nothing like that. Just, can you imagine just going and sitting to get out of depression? I don't think so. But one of the things that happened very often at that time, you might be surprised, but probably not, is that powerful men, after their wives had given them their children and became older and they grew tired of their wives, it was a lot easier to have your wife committed than to get a divorce. This is a true story. And so many women, many middle-aged women, were sent away for this rest cure, where they would get deeper and deeper into depression and end up never coming out. And their husbands could live the life they wanted, and with their young mistresses, unencumbered by having to live with a wife who is now receiving the rest cure in a rocking chair in the halls of Building 50, where Mary Sue is living, having been sent away from her home by her husband. And the next morning I said, you know, you got to move from there. That's not a good place for you anymore. You have to find a new place. And so the network went out to the Hail Marys, our friends in Traverse, and within days another place was found, and she moved out, and an amazing change of mood occurred as soon as she moved out of there. Suddenly she was back into life. So I think there are a lot of those faces that came to her, and a lot of the things that she saw. She heard things rolling around on the floor, and keys dropping off tables, things like that while she was there. But her circumstances were so similar to the circumstances of the women who were sent there, many of the women who were sent there, that I think she was getting sucked into that vortex and needed to get out of there. So if you are somebody that is in that situation, I would not recommend renting one of the places there until you're more on your feet, so to speak. So I'm going to back up in history. Since then, I've been on that property in various places. There's a really fun restaurant, Mexican Tex-Mex restaurant there that has great vegan Mexican food and really fresh ingredients and stuff. We go there, walking around the place, and I don't feel that oppression so much anymore. It's really lightened up because there are living people there now that are filling the space with their energy. I do have some concern about there's a place there for senior citizens, like a assisted living place, and I have not been in there, but that kind of concerns me because people who get closer and closer to the end of life tend to have more encounters with the spirit world, and who knows, they may be there, but maybe it's not a problem. I don't know, just don't put me there. Send me on an ice floe. But so I'm going to back up years before it was developed and tell you a couple of stories of some really significant things that happened there after I take a drink. Cheers, everybody. So, my children were teenagers. My children were adrenaline junkie teenagers. Yep, they were. And one winter, they went up, unbeknownst to me. I did not know they were going there, but I couldn't have, whatever. And some friends, a small group of friends, including my kids, went up. I don't think Ezra was with them at this time. I think he was younger. And they took cameras, 35 millimeter click. This is before cell phones. This is before smartphones, cell phones even, and a VCR, a video camera, with where you put the tape in and you videotape. And they went to this one building that had a sign that said Women's Cottage, and it was one of the smaller buildings away from the great big brick buildings. It was looked more like a Victorian house. It was not one of the big giant buildings that like the Building 50. And this place had a big veranda and steps that went up. And the veranda had the fence around it, but it was open. There was an opening to it. And so it's nighttime, and there's nobody there. There's no development there. So they go up, and they go up the stairs. And I remember watching this video. They came right home and showed me the video. And they're filming, and there's snow on the porch, and there's no footsteps on the porch. And the video camera shows them going up the stairs, and you can hear them talking and saying, let's look in the windows. And the video camera goes and pans the windows, and then they have the video camera light and put it up near the glass so it's not reflecting, and scan the rooms. And the rooms have all this peeling paint, and there's leftover medical equipment lying around and furniture, and it's just real creepy looking. And then they walk down the porch a little ways, and meanwhile they're taking pictures of photographs as they're videotaping, and then go down to the next set of windows and put the camera inside and scan there, and they're talking in hushed tones, and there's, do you see anything in there? I don't see anything. Well, hold it still a minute. They said, let's just look. And did you hear that? I don't know, what did you hear? I thought I heard something moving in there. I didn't hear anything. And then they went down a little further, and they're freaking themselves out with this video camera. And then they said, okay, let's, then they turned around, hit the edge of the porch, and started coming back. And again, they're filming the windows. And they came to one window, and you could hear them just intake air on the video. And it was like, what's that? And inside the glass on one of the windows, in what looked like white paint that was actually had drips coming off of it, was the name Isabelle, painted like right inside the window, and there were still drips coming down, like it had just been painted. Isabelle on that window. And they're like, was that there before? And they're taking pictures on the camera. Bunce found some of these photographs a little while ago while he was digging through the basement, and then they ended up in a box again somewhere else. So I will keep looking for those and post them here when we get them, the Isabelle ones. But Isabelle had the E looked like a backwards 3. And when you flipped it, it looked like U3 is what the word looked like, and there were 3 of them on the porch. But Isabelle is clearly visible. And then on the windowsill is written, and they had already filmed this, and there was nothing there. And this is like, the camera was on the entire time. It wasn't like stop, action, and then somebody else is writing stuff in there. But none of them were inside anyway, and this was clearly written inside. And inside on the window ledge, it said, all things must come to an end. And then again, Isabelle. And they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. And click, cameras off, and then they got in their cars and they came back here and popped that videotape in the VCR, the big VCR and the big TV with the big fat body in the back. And we watched that, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. What do you think that was? I don't know. We thought we heard something moving around. I said, do you think there was somebody inside there? I don't know how somebody could get inside there. Well, clearly there was somebody inside there, they said. And they're like, oh my God, I think we saw a ghost. And I'm like, yeah, you probably did. You probably experienced a ghost. So somebody has that videotape. I would just love to get a hold of that thing again. And there are photographs, as I said, and we'll find those photographs. But I don't think they went back up after that. That kind of really spooked them for a while anyway. And then I think it was that spring or maybe the next spring. It was when Munson Hospital up there was starting to build out more off towards the back, towards the women's cottage. And my daughter and I went up to go to that. I think it must have been that spring, to go to that building because Isabelle, that's I just kept thinking about her, and I kept, who was Isabelle, and I kept picturing her. And I pictured her as a young girl about the age of my young daughter at that time. But I saw her with really, really fine white hair, like very, very light blonde hair. And she was super small, super thin, just really thin. And I just kept picturing her, and I thought, maybe we should go up there and just see if there's something we can do, So it was spring. It was this beautiful day. Today was our first nice day here. We had in the 60s. It was probably 65 degrees, sunny, and we parked where you could park, and then you had to walk maybe a quarter-mile to get to the women's cottage. And the fence on the porch had been closed and locked. You couldn't get on the porch anymore. Couldn't get close enough to see the name painted on the window to see even if it was still there. But we did bring a little dictaphone tape, a little portable, and it had a cassette, a mini cassette recorder. It was not digital. It had the little tape thing inside of it. And we used it not for ghost things, but used it for schoolwork and things like that. And so we brought that with, and we went to the building. And as we got there, I could just feel this sadness, just this sadness, just despair, I think is the word. And I said that the steps were kind of janky, and I didn't want to go climbing up the steps, so I just said, I'll sit here on the bottom step, and why don't you go up and turn on the tape and record and see if anybody wants to talk to us. And so Eric goes up, and she has the little tape and stuck her arm through the chain link fence as far as she could reach into the porch and just clicked it on. And I just sat on the bottom step, and I just kept seeing this girl, this very pale-skinned, young, very, very skinny girl. And all I could see her eyes were kind of sunken. And I just closed my eyes and I just poured out love, I just poured out as much love as I could. This is like a teenager. This was a teenager. And I just poured love, tried to fill that space, fill that building with as much love as I could. I just love. And after maybe 10 minutes, Era says, okay, I'm done. And she comes down, and we didn't say anything, and we didn't hear anything. And we just walked back in silence to the car. And when we got in the car, I said, well, do you want to listen to it? And she said, yeah, okay. So we closed up the windows, even though it was nice out, because there's this tiny little thing, a tiny little speaker. We didn't have it hooked up to a computer or anything. And we turned it on, and we listened. And this is what it sounded like. I'm going to go through, it'll be shorter than it was, but I'm going to go through the sounds from beginning to end. This is exactly what it sounded like. And, I'm not going to describe it. I'm going to take a drink, and then I'm going to try to recreate the sound of the tape. Okay. Come closer. Okay, I'm done. Click. As we sat there, tears just started falling from my eyes. We couldn't make out what she was saying. We didn't have the electronics to enhance what was being said, but what was being said was so clear. after counting to 3, it just went back to static, and then Era said, "Okay, I'm done." And as we were listening to it, we both, tears just falling out of our eyes. We said, "Let's put that on again and see if we can." We leaned in to try to see if we could hear any of the words. And I got this picture of Isabelle. That's who it was. It was Isabelle. And she was trying to tell us what was in her heart. She was trying to express her anguish. And the 1, 2, 3 was just before she kicked out what she was standing on and hung herself. She took her own life. She counted to 3 and took her own life to end her anguish. And there she was with all her anguish still there. So once again, I just poured as much love as I could. And I thought about her very often. And I would go there at night. I would go there. I would lie in my bed and close my eyes and take myself there, take my consciousness there, and look for her and tell her to go. Tell her to just leave, to go, that she didn't have to be there anymore. Forgive her. Give her permission to just leave. And I did that often. And then I stopped dreaming about her, and I wrote a song about her. And after I wrote the song, and I would sing the song, and it was a plea to her to go. I'm not certain she's gone, but I know that the building has been redeveloped, and it's now, I believe it's the place that if you have someone in the hospital and you stay in there, if you need a place to stay nearby, it's the hospitality house. I believe that's the building. That's the hospitality house. I don't know if she's still there. I certainly hope she isn't still there. But I wrote the song for her, and I can play again a little bit. Would you like to hear the song before we say goodnight? Anybody? Yeah? All things come to an end. Yeah, I'll play the song. Let me see. I'm going to push this back so I can use the light a little. Remember, please be forgiving. I'm just able to play again. I haven't been able to play for a long time after I hurt my shoulder. So if I mess up, I can blame it on that and the bourbon. This is Isabelle. Come closer. Nothing ever lasts forever, Isabelle. Nothing lasts much longer than a sigh. Nothing left to keep you here but only pain and only fear. And don't you think it's time you said goodbye? Voices of the choices that you made so long ago. All is just remembering broken hearts and broken wings. Oh, Isabelle, you only fell, there's nothing to atone. Nothing ever lasts forever, Isabelle. Nothing lasts much longer than a sigh. Nothing left to keep you here but only pain and all the fear. And don't you think it's time you said goodbye? Isabelle, just sail away tonight, feeling nothing but remorse. Always blame yourself, of course. Oh, there's the bed you made, now go and lie in it alone. There is nothing to portend. All things must come to an end. Oh, Isabelle, just bid farewell and set your sails for home. Nothing ever lasts forever, Isabelle. Nothing lasts much longer than a sigh. Nothing left to keep you here but all the pain and all that fear. And don't you think it's time you said goodbye? Isabelle, just sail away tonight. Winter always comes to spring, leaving the remembering of all the lonely winter nights endured all on your own. In the shade of cedar trees, stand and make your final plea, then turn your face, just leave this place and sail away to home. Nothing ever lasts forever, Isabelle. Nothing lasts much longer than a sigh. Nothing left to keep you here but only pain and only fear. Don't you think it's time you said goodbye? Isabelle, just sail away tonight. Isabelle, sail away. One, two, three. Let's all send her love wherever she is, and all those who blame themselves, of course. We're all just human. We all just fall. We all can love each other. Yeah, right. Hang in there, people. This too shall pass. All things must come to an end, right? So, that's all for tonight. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about next week. If you have some ideas of stories, maybe I will tell a little bit about the Pensacola house. I have to talk about Piety Hill. Is Carrie there? Maybe I'll do Piety Hill first. Ooh, that's a corker. Maybe I'll tell some Beltane stories. Anyway, it's been fun. I love you all. Thanks for coming along, and Share this with your friends who need a little distraction. Yeah, we could all use a little distraction right now. The veil is very thin. Our ancestors, our loved ones are not far away. And neither am I. I'm right here. I cannot wait to throw my arms around so many of you. Be well. Don't drink all the bourbon in one night. Bye.